And it's magnificent. You know,
Right.
go back into the files and pick out little.
Every Sunday night, tens of millions of Americans gathered in their living rooms, faces lit by the TV's glow, all tuned to one man, Ed Sullivan. He was the stoic, almost awkward ringmaster of the biggest show on earth. What they saw was a calm, if slightly uncomfortable, host who ran the most important stage in entertainment. What they didn't see was what happened backstage when his biggest stars publicly defied him. They didn't see the man whose temper was as legendary as his influence. This is the story of the moments Ed Sullivan truly lost it, of the on-air defiance from music and comedy legends that made him explode with a rage that was hidden from the public for decades. Ed Sullivan was the great stone face of television, the man who could make or break a career with a single booking. But in 1955, something happened that made him snap. A young, trailblazing musician decided to go against his direct orders on live TV. In the moments that followed, out of view of the cameras, Sullivan exploded. The legend says he used words so shocking, so racially charged, that witnesses couldn't believe what they were hearing. The confrontation almost turned physical. For decades, the true story was whispered about, a dark legend in TV history. The musician was banned forever. But what he did that night didn't just infuriate the most powerful man on television, it helped change the course of rock and roll. To understand why these explosions were so shocking, you have to get just how much power Ed Sullivan had. In the mid-20th century, there was no internet, no streaming, no hundreds of cable channels. There were 3 networks, and on Sunday nights, America belonged to Ed. His show, which started as Toast of the Town in 1948, wasn't just a program, it was a national event. Sullivan presented a true variety show, opera singers, plate spinners, comedians, and circus acrobats. As comedian Alan King famously put it, Ed does nothing, but he does it better than anyone else in television. He wasn't a natural on camera. Sullivan was famously stiff, with hunched shoulders and a nasally voice. Critics could be cruel, with one writing that Sullivan got where he was, not by having a personality, but by having no personality. But Sullivan, a former newspaper columnist with a boxer's temper, didn't take criticism lying down. He once sent a female critic a short, vicious letter that simply read, "Dear Miss Van Horn, you, B-word. Sincerely, Ed Sullivan." This was the man behind the curtain, competitive and thin-skinned. While his executive producer, Marlo Lewis, co-created the show and handled many details, the final authority was always Ed. Performers got strict instructions on what to sing, what jokes to tell, and how long they had. The show was a tightly controlled ship, and Ed Sullivan was its captain. An appearance on his stage could make you a star overnight. It was the platform that introduced America to Bob Hope and a young duo named Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. It launched Elvis Presley into the stratosphere in 1956, in a broadcast watched by over 60 million people, a staggering 82.6% of the entire TV audience. And in 1964, he brought the Beatles to America, an appearance that became one of the most watched events in television history, but this power came with an iron fist. Sullivan demanded loyalty and, above all, obedience. He admitted himself, "I'm a pop-off. I flare up, then I go around apologizing." But for some artists, there would be no apology. They would cross a line and discover that the calm host on camera could become a tyrant backstage, a man willing to destroy a career to maintain control of his kingdom. The first major crack in Ed Sullivan's public persona appeared on November 20, 1955. The man who caused it was a rock and roll pioneer whose sound was so revolutionary it felt like it was from another planet. His name was Bo Diddley, born Ellis Otha Bates. Bo Diddley was a true original. In March 1955, his debut single, Bo Diddley, was a smash hit, spending 2 weeks at #1 on the R&B charts. The song was built on a syncopated, driving rhythm that became his signature, the Bo Diddley beat. Ed Sullivan saw him perform and booked him for the show, a monumental opportunity for a black artist in 1955. It was a portal into millions of white living rooms. But the booking came with a catch. The story goes that Sullivan or his producers heard Bo Diddley singing Tennessee Ernie Ford's hit, 16 Tons, backstage and insisted that's what he performed for the mainstream audience. Diddley, of course, wanted to perform his own revolutionary hit. The story has a few versions. One claims Diddley saw his name on a cue card and mistakenly thought it meant to play his song of the same name. But a more compelling account suggests deliberate defiance. Just before a commercial break, Diddley reportedly told the musical director he'd changed his mind and was playing his own song, throwing the production into chaos. When the show went live, Bo Diddley strapped on his signature square guitar and launched into the thunderous rhythm of Bo Diddley. For many Americans, it was the first time they'd heard anything like it, a key moment in bringing raw rock and roll to a national audience. The audience may have been captivated, but Sullivan was seething. He felt he'd been publicly double-crossed. The confrontation that followed has become a dark part of rock and roll lore. According to Bo Diddley's later accounts and some reports, Sullivan stormed up to him, furious. The most inflammatory version of the story claims Sullivan told Diddley, "You are the first black boy to ever double-cross me." For Diddley, the alleged racial insult was unforgivable. He later said the way Sullivan stressed the word black was as bad as using a slur. When his manager tried to intervene, Diddley reportedly snapped, "I don't give a shit about Mr. Sullivan, he don't talk to me like that." The argument reportedly almost turned physical. Sullivan was true to his word and banned Bo Diddley from the show for life. To add insult to injury, Diddley later claimed he was never even paid for the historic performance. The incident cemented Bo Diddley's reputation as a rebel and served as a stark warning to others: defy Ed Sullivan at your own peril. If the Bo Diddley incident was a crack in Sullivan's persona, the clash with comedian Jackie Mason 9 years later was a full-blown earthquake. This time, the perceived slight wasn't a song, it was a finger that Sullivan believed was an obscene insult broadcast live into millions of homes. On October 18, 1964, Jackie Mason was a comedian on the rise. He was in the middle of a 6-appearance contract worth $45,000, a massive sum at the time. That night, the show was interrupted by an unscheduled speech from President Lyndon B. Johnson, throwing the tight schedule into chaos. When the show returned, Sullivan, standing off camera, began frantically signaling to Mason. He held up 2 fingers, for 2 minutes, then 1 finger. Mason, a quick-witted improviser, decided to make it part of his act. "I'm getting lots of fingers tonight," he joked. He then pointed around playfully, saying, "Here's a finger for you and a finger for you and a finger for you." From Mason's perspective, he was just having fun with the moment, using his thumb and index finger. But from Sullivan's angle, it looked like Mason had given him the middle finger. Backstage, all hell broke loose. Sullivan confronted Mason in a rage. Mason insisted he'd done nothing of the sort and wasn't even aware of the middle finger's obscene meaning at the time. Sullivan didn't believe him. He cancelled the rest of Mason's contract and banned him from the show. According to Mason, Sullivan told him, "I will destroy you in show business." And he nearly did. In the 1960s, a ban from Sullivan's show could feel like being excommunicated from the industry. Mason's TV work dried up. Refusing to let his reputation be ruined, Mason fought back, filing a libel suit against Sullivan. In a surprising turn, after seeing video evidence that proved Mason had not made an obscene gesture, Sullivan invited him back on the show 2 years later and issued a public apology. But the damage was done. It would take Mason nearly 2 decades to fully recover his career, which he finally did with a hit one-man show on Broadway in the 1980s. By 1967, the culture was shifting under Sullivan's feet. On September 17, that new generation, in the form of a charismatic and dangerous band called The Doors, walked onto his stage. The collision that followed became an iconic moment of rock and roll defiance. The Doors were the embodiment of the 60s counterculture. Their hit song, "Light My Fire," had soared to #1. But the producers and Sullivan had a problem with one line, "Girl, we couldn't get much higher." In 1967, "Higher" was an unmistakable drug reference, totally unsuitable for a family show. During rehearsal, a producer told the band they had to change it, suggesting, "Girl, there's nothing I require." The band, understanding the huge opportunity, seemingly agreed. Keyboardist Ray Manzarek later recalled promising they'd use the altered lyric. But as soon as the producer left, Jim Morrison told his bandmates, "We're not changing a word." That evening, as the show went live, the Doors launched into their hit. When the moment of truth arrived, Jim Morrison leaned into the microphone, looked straight into the camera, and with a slight smirk, sang the original, uncensored line, even emphasizing the word "higher." Backstage, the reaction was pure fury. After the performance, Sullivan, who normally shook his guests' hands, refused to shake theirs and went straight to a commercial. A producer confronted the band, telling them, "Mr. Sullivan wanted you for 6 more shows, but you'll never work the Ed Sullivan Show again." Jim Morrison's legendary reply captured the band's spirit perfectly. He reportedly shrugged and said, "Hey, man. We just did the Sullivan Show." The ban was immediate and permanent. But unlike the earlier incidents, this one became a badge of honor for the Doors. It cemented their image as anti-authoritarian rebels. While Sullivan had once again asserted his authority, the world was changing. An artist could now lose the battle with Ed Sullivan but win the war for cultural relevance. These 3 incidents paint a picture of a man at war with the culture he was presenting. On the surface, Sullivan was the moral arbiter for Middle America. His rages were born from a desperate need for control over his family-friendly empire, but to see Sullivan only as a thin-skinned tyrant misses the man's complexity. The same host who was at the center of the Bo Diddley dispute was also one of the most important allies of the civil rights movement in television history. From the very beginning in 1948, Sullivan made a conscious and controversial choice to feature black performers. At a time when TV was overwhelmingly white, his stage became a beacon of integration. Advertisers, including Ford Motor Company, threatened to pull their sponsorship. Southern affiliates threatened to drop the show. Viewers sent angry letters when he did simple things like shaking Nat King Cole's hand or kissing Pearl Bailey on the cheek, acts seen as radical in a segregated America. Sullivan's response was to double down. He booked an unprecedented number of black artists, from legends like Louis Armstrong and Ella Fitzgerald to opera singers like Leontyne Price. He was instrumental in Motown's success, giving a national platform to the Supremes, the Temptations, Stevie Wonder, and the Jackson 5. He presented these artists not as novelties, but as supremely talented equals. This consistent presentation of black excellence, beamed into American living rooms, was a quiet but powerful form of activism that helped change hearts and minds. This was the paradox of Ed Sullivan. He was capable of both explosive anger and courageous stands against racism. He was a product of an older era who demanded respect, yet he gave a platform to the very forces of rock and roll and social change that were dismantling that old world. He was a flawed and complicated figure, but his impact is undeniable. For 23 years, Ed Sullivan was a cultural institution. The man America saw on Sundays was a comforting, steady presence. But behind the curtain, a different man existed, one of passion, pride, and a fearsome temper. The stories of his clashes with Bo Diddley, Jackie Mason, and the Doors are more than just backstage gossip. They are rare glimpses into the personality of the man who held the keys to the kingdom. They reveal a man struggling to maintain control in a rapidly changing world. Yet, this same complicated man used his immense power to push for progress, providing a stage for black artists when few others would. These explosive moments don't just tell us about Ed Sullivan's temper. They reveal that the history of entertainment was written not just with applause, but with fury, defiance, and the unyielding will of its stone-faced king. What do you think of this hidden side of Ed Sullivan? Was his demand for control justified, or were his actions unforgivable? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And for more stories about the secret history of classic television, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Thanks for watching.